that right there. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Joe Soltados, and I am with Option Capital as a clinical risk manager. Looks like the speaker's notes aren't working, so I'm going to just shoot a little. So we're going to dive right into it. So the disclaimer here is that at the end of the day, my opinions are the ones on the slide. My company, Option Care Health, does not endorse or state that anything on these slides is true, but well researched and happy to have any conversations as we are going through this presentation. So here's what I want you guys to walk away with today. Number one, I want you guys to be able to understand what is an RCA and what is a CAPA. I want you guys to understand and dig into what do those errors look like, how did they happen, and get away from just saying the error was just a human error. Because when you say something is a human error, you're not taking the opportunity to dig into what happened, why did it happen, what in that system allowed for that error to occur, and how are we preventing it from happening again down the road. I want you guys to look at some tools. My personal favorite is the 5 why, and those of you that know me will probably not be surprised to hear that I like asking the question why over and over and over again until we figure out what happened, what went wrong. And another piece that I think is really important and that is really underutilized in conversations about risk and about quality is talking about what is second victim syndrome? What does it mean to the person who was involved in that error? What does it mean to the people who may not have contributed or caused it, but were involved? You all know a pharmacist, you all know a pharmacy technician, a nurse who may have been involved in an error and who has been traumatized following that error occurring. Today, I've already used the word RCA, but it stands for root cause analysis. Our CAPAs are our corrective and preventative actions. ARC is the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. I'm not going to go through all of them, and I'm going to try and do my best as we go through this presentation to define them each as we get there. But the big takeaway here that I want you guys thinking about is, as we're going through these slides, I want you to think about, if you're a leader in your organization, what does your response look like to an error? So let's talk about why RCA matters. If you are dealing with any type of variance in your policies, if you're dealing with anything, it comes down to why. We don't work with bad people, and I would wager everyone in this room thinks that the people they work with are good clinicians working at the top of their license, doing the best they can for the patients that they take care of. When errors happen, we need to look at what in the system allowed for that error to happen. Is there not a forced function that requires you to do a DUR? Is there not a forced function that allows you to control how that workflow works within your organization? And if not, why not? And you can't talk about root cause analyses, you can't talk about quality, you can't talk about corrective and preventative actions without also taking a moment to acknowledge, what does just culture look like in your organization? We're not going to spend a ton of time on just culture, but I really want to emphasize the fact that if you do not align your responses to events to the behavior exhibited by the people involved in those events occurring, you're going to damage your reporting and quality structure within your organization. If you have an event that involves true human error, something that was truly an accident, and you treat that as though it was reckless, you are going to damage the way that people respond and the way that people report. And you rely as leaders within your organizations on free and volunteered event reports. Excuse me. So philosophically, I want you guys thinking about that as we talk. It is important. When you emphasize the systems over the individuals and you're saying, my system contributed here, my system allowed this to happen, you're supporting your team, you're helping them grow as clinicians, and you're not looking to blame them when the system was fragile to begin with. So when do you want to perform an RCA? And there's a lot of data out there, but I would say as you are looking at evaluating your clinical program, what you want to do is to talk with your leaders and figure out what events matter to us. I would suggest you look at events that have a lot of near misses. I would suggest you look at events where there is actual harm to a patient or there was a significant risk of harm to a patient. If something could go wrong that could lead to a sentinel event, you want to understand, what does our exposure look like? Because ultimately we're committed, and if we're talking about these things, we're all committed to improving patient safety. When we these events off, especially if there's a near miss that you see once, twice, 3 times a week, or you see it more than that, it's a constant error. Let's say it's compounding things in the wrong device, like they're supposed to be an elastomeric and it goes out in a syringe. Is it serious? No. But what is that telling you? It's telling you don't have a good control on your dispensing process. Why is it possible that something can make it past the compounder and the pharmacist and potentially the nurse who's administering without having a better idea of how it got out? What does it look like with barcoding? Do you have access to tools like Dosage or other tools where you can look at the record and see what's being made? What tools are available to you? And lastly, we're not going to talk a lot about environmental deviations as they relate to your clean room operation, because that's not where my expertise is in. However, when we are speaking about environmental deviations, you can use these same processes. Look at your training logs. Look at how your teams were trained. Look at your temperature excursions. Because at the end of the day, having growth in an ISO 5 is a deviation in your environmental monitoring, right? So we want to make sure that we're looking into everything that's going on and not just saying, oh, it was nothing. Oh, it was a one-time off. It was a one-off event. Because these things, when you address them timely, help you prevent from having multiple recurrent issues. So this is a very high-level framework for how we're going to handle root cause analyses. The first thing I want you guys to all think about is not what you think happened, but first actually figure out what happened. Make it clear. If you get event reports that are not clear, or maybe they're like a page and a half long when really the issue is, Joe got the medication dosed at 1 gram, it's supposed to be 2 grams, and it happened for whatever reason, you need to define it, figure out why. Once you've defined the problem, I want you to take some time and I want you to look at then, what does that process look like? If you're in a leadership position here, you probably know what the process should look like. Stop. Ask your team, what did you do? Look at your policy, look at your SOP. Start with step 1. Don't skip and say, I know they did this correctly. Because if you're doing that, why are you doing the process at all? If you're just checking a box, you're not enhancing your policies, or you're not enhancing your quality program at with your team. The questions, and you don't have to do it every single time, but ask the questions. Figure out what happened. If you don't start at step 1, there's a good chance you're going to miss a component that contributed or was the root of the error that you're dealing with. Once you've identified or once you've mapped your process, now it's time to start analyzing. Start asking why. Why did the wrong dose go out? Why did the wrong device go out? Why was the pump programmed wrong? And keep asking why until you get to a point at the system where the system allowed the error to go. Once you've spent that time analyzing, I want you guys to start looking at solutions. And the solution is not, I coached my team. I asked them to be more mindful. I said, here's our policy. Why didn't you follow it? Follow it next time. How, and this is not a blame right here, right? But I want to see a show of hands. Like, when you are looking at errors, do you talk, if you talk to your team members, raise your hands and ask them like what happened, how it happened. So about half of the room, and I recognize not everyone in here is involved in the QA process directly at a high level, but as we're looking through that and you're looking to identify solutions, ask your teams, what's broken? What isn't working? Because if you're the leader at the team, there's a very good chance you, as the individual, don't, excuse me. There's a good chance that you, as the individual, don't know what's actually going on in the day-to-day. Or if you do know what's going on in the day-to-day, you're not as familiar with the team members who are doing the work 40 hours a week and are intimately familiar with those processes. They may give you answers you don't like. They may give you answers you feel like, well, I can't do anything about that. I just work here. That's fine. Hear them and then escalate it to your leadership. Eventually, if you have an issue that's causing patient safety concerns, I want you guys to really be thinking about escalating and continuing to follow up and then auditing. And that leads us into our last point in this framework, and that is implementing a true follow-up. Your RCA and your CAPA is not a checklist for you to write down once, file it away, and then we're done. Audit. Auditing is a dirty word. Everyone hates to audit because you're all already busy. You've got a full-time job to do on top of looking and checking on. Pardon me. You've got a full-time job to do. You're not there to just audit, right? But I would challenge you to look at your calendar. Block an hour a week. You've got 40 of them at a minimum if you're in a leadership position. Block an hour a week. Look at how are we doing with dispensing? Have we had the same dispensing error occur? If we have, it's time to go back to your RCA because the implementation that we put in place wasn't effective. We're going to talk a little bit further in this presentation about the hierarchy of effectiveness, which is something that's published by ASMP, and I feel really strongly is a really, really useful visual aid when we're talking about error reductions. There we go. So with that, let's talk about how we define the problem. The first thing, and it's not on the slide, well, it is on the slide, but I want you guys to think about, don't use blame-oriented language. When you start using blame-oriented language in how you're defining the problem, you're setting up your mind that someone is at fault. Your first goal is to figure out what happened. It's not that Joe dispensed the wrong drug because he was being negligent today. It's John received vancomycin 1 gram. John was prescribed vancomycin 2 grams. The order came over on this day, and this is what happened. Set yourself up a clear timeline. When you say that the pharmacist was being negligent in their duties and dispensed the wrong dose, you are immediately setting up in your mind the idea that you know what happened and why it happened. It was the pharmacist's fault. We're going to punish the pharmacist for making the dispensing error. You're going to disengage your teams if that's the approach that you take when you're handling errors. And when you have that poorly defined problem statement, your RCA is going to be completely ineffective because you have a foregone conclusion before you even start looking into things, before you even start talking to staff, before you've mapped your process, you know what happened and you know how to fix it. And it's disciplinary action and it's not gonna solve your dispensing problems. What does gathering data mean? You're a pharmacy, you dispense drugs. So what does gathering data look like? Look at your historical events. I don't expect you on every single dispensing error to go back and look at every single dispensing error that you've had. But if you're the leader and you're involved in your QA program, think about what themes you recognize in your dispensing. Is there something that's consistent? Is there not something that's consistent? If there is a consistent near miss or a consistent error, talk to your team, say, guys, I'm trying to understand this. I don't know why this keeps happening. I've tried a couple of things and we're continuing to have the issue. I want you guys to know that I'm not here blaming you. I'm here because y'all are the folks that are doing the work on a daily basis. I want to understand what you think will move the needle, because ultimately we're all here to take care of people. And if we don't come up with solutions, we're going to keep having the same problem. Interview your staff. You know your teams. If your teams are shy, pull them aside and talk to them one-on-one. If your teams are going to benefit from a large group setting, pull in the team members that you think are going to want to be involved, and then pull the ones that you don't think are going to want to be involved in too. They're all going to have stuff to say, and I bet you the ones that didn't want to be involved are going to be the ones that give you the most feedback. You got to just get it out of them. And then look at your records. Look at the timings. When did you get that prescription? When was that prescription entered? Was there another order that was sent over and maybe you weren't made aware of it? What happened? Look at every piece of it. Was there an electronic order? Was there a handwritten order? Was the handwritten order legible? If it wasn't legible, does your pharmacist feel empowered to call and speak to them? Did they try and call and speak to them and they couldn't get through to someone? What happened? And maybe it truly was human error, but we're not going to know until we've done all of this digging. Sure I miss anything? One big piece here, and I'm going to preface this with, I am not a lawyer, so this is not legal advice, but if you have a QA system, you are probably part of a patient safety organization that has a reporting platform called a PSES, which is a patient safety evaluation system. There is a whole list of them available on ARC's website, and they get into how you are designating designating investigations as a patient safety work product. Not legal advice again. Be very mindful with how you are handling patient safety work product. If you do not follow the guidance outlined by the statutory regulations that govern how you handle PSWP classified items, you are putting yourself in jeopardy. So my very firm guidance to everyone would be, understand what you are doing. And just because something is client attorney privilege doesn't mean it's PSWP. So be really, really, really careful with all of that. Just understand your policies and read through the regulations on ARC. So we talked a little bit already about mapping the process, but I want you guys to really spend some time. Map your process. Look at what your policy says to do. If your policy says to do X, but your pharmacists always skip that step, what's the incentive? Are they busy? Do they think it's not important? Understand what the incentive is for that step to be getting skipped. And then your job as the leader is to find a way to then remove that incentive. Is there a way to add an AI agent to do data entry for repetitive tasks like med profiles if there's not direct integration? Is there a way to streamline that process or offload it to a clinical pharmacy technician? Or is there a way to do something that's going to alleviate some of that time for that pharmacist? But we need to remove the incentives where there's incentive to skip a step. We need to then highlight based on what you're being told happened versus what the process is, and figure out where in that mapping the breakdown occurred. It sounds like a lot of work, and the first couple are going to take you forever because it is not the most intuitive thing the first couple of times, because it feels like the people you're talking to are going to feel like maybe you doubt them. And your job is to reassure them that I'm looking to understand what happened. I'm not here to tell you that you did anything wrong. And even in situations where there is an error, I want you guys to withhold having the conversation about discipline for a couple of days. Now, if there is a really severe one, engage your HR teams and figure out how you need to manage it. But you can talk about expectation setting. You can talk about all these other things, but what you shouldn't be doing is the day after an error happens, talking about writing that person up, because you probably haven't even finished your investigation yet. When you're looking at mapping that process, I want you guys to spend time with looking at what should happen? What do you have? Your RCA and your mapping of the process is not you creating new documents. You're looking at what exists. What do we have available? How did we train our teams? What did that training process look like? What is available to them in real time in terms of educational material? What can they use to problem solve on their own? Now we're at the point where we're going to be talking about identifying root causes. And before we go really any further, I want to differentiate what is a root cause versus what is a contributing factor. Contributing factors explain what happened. They don't explain why it happened. Being busy is a contributing factor. The drug going out incorrectly because you don't have a forcing function to confirm the type of device it's supposed to be in, that's your root cause. So when you're thinking about these things, I want you guys to really spend time on what is happening in your system, because ultimately your quality programs are driven by systems, not people. Human beings are prone to error. Human beings have bad days. They're tired. They're sick. They have personal stressors going on in their lives. You cannot rely on your people alone when there are systems fixes that you can implement that will prevent errors from occurring. And what gets me in my role is seeing an RCA saying it was human error. Humans make mistakes, and relying on humans to not make mistakes 100% of the time is setting yourself up for frustration and failure as a person involved with the quality program. And it's going to frustrate your teams because you are going to hold them to perfection. And no one in this room is perfect. My phone's not even perfect. The thing needs an update every other day. So if removing that factor doesn't prevent it from happening again, you didn't get to the point where it's the root. And I know that one of the frequently heard things that I hear, not just in any one organization, but in healthcare in general, is staffing. And staffing can certainly be a contributing factor. And it is a very strongly correlated contributing factor, especially when people are then rushing to catch up and to get everything done, because the number of patients does not change based on how many staff you have on hand on a given day. So you have to take care of the people. Staffing is a contributing factor, and we need to make sure that we are looking at that as leaders to make sure that the teams have the support that they need to do the work that they need to do. So we're going to do a little bit of a case study. We're going to talk about an incorrectly dispensed drug. That's coming up. But for right now, when you're looking at the wrong drug, figure out how. Figure out why. If you don't have barcoding and you have lookalike, sound-alike products, you're already set up for failure. Not being able to barcode and scan barcoding makes it so much harder for your teams to differentiate between two drug products. Does anyone in here dispense specialty products? A couple of folks. Think about your IG products. They're all so differently named. You have Gamaplex, you have Gamunex, you have Gamma Guard. They're all alphabetically next to each other. They all look kind of similar. How are you preventing those from getting dispensed wrong? You don't have barcoding. So a couple of folks in here that I know, and I know that you're not going to be surprised. Again, I want you guys to think about the 5 whys. Patient gets the wrong drug. Why? Why was the label wrong? Well, the pharmacist generated the wrong label. Well, why did they generate a wrong label? If the order was entered wrong, why was the order entered wrong? Well, the prescriber's handwriting was terrible and I couldn't read it. Well, why was their handwriting bad? Why didn't you use an electronic order entry? Well, the system doesn't support electronic order entry. Well, now, guess what? Where's the system issue here? The system doesn't make the prescriber make the legible order through your CPOE. So now you know where to fix it. Yeah, the pharmacist should have called, but the pharmacist was tired. Pharmacist was dealing with some personal issues, right? The system issue here is your system not supporting them having the tools that they need to read the orders clearly. You can put in forcing functions, and that will help to reduce the risk of these errors. And I know that everyone's going to come around and say, well, what about legible met errors when the wrong drug is selected? And those happen, right? Is it that they entered the wrong drug completely, or that you can't read it and cefepime looked like cefazolin and the wrong drug went out? So when you're developing your recommendations, you want to focus on those system fixes. And the theme that you're all hearing is systems, systems, systems. Consider, again, your technology fixes. AI is all the hype right now. I don't know that that's the fix for everything, but there is certainly a space for the use of AI. Look at your staffing. Are you approving PTO appropriately? Are you planning for PTO? PTO is a reality for leadership, and you need to make sure that you're planning for it. Are you planning for weather changes? If you have a deviation in your room, do you know that your hood always goes out of the humidity range when it gets too hot or too cold? And lastly, are your policies good? Do you need to make a change to your policy to support safe and effective patient care? And you need to make it smart. If you're not making it specific, if you're not able to measure it or achieve it, you're wasting your time. If it's not relevant, again, you're wasting your time. And if it's going to take 6 years to implement a simple fix, you're wasting your time. If you have a CAPA that does not have a clearly identified owner, a clearly identified timeline, you don't have a corrective action plan, you're crossing your fingers and hoping that it doesn't happen again. And that corrective action plan, again, needs to have the ability to be audited. Whether it's spot checking, whether it's sitting next to your staff as they're doing roles and just saying, hey, I'm looking to understand what's happening, or even better, go in the back and stand next to your staff and do the work with them. Figure out what's happening. So here's that hierarchy of effectiveness. Easy to read? It's okay to read on the screen. Forcing functions are how you will make meaningful changes. Most of you sitting down in here probably don't have the ability to change your EMR directly. I would wager probably less than a handful do. However, if you're identifying consistent themes, your role isn't to fix it. Your role is to raise visibility. Your role is to make your leaders understand the business impacts of the changes you need to have happen and the impact on the patients and on your clinicians. The easiest and most effective things you can do, the easiest and least effective things you can do are these things at the bottom. They're low leverage corrections. If you just tell someone to be more careful, you're expecting them to be perfect. If you're saying, here's some education on the topic, education doesn't solve the root of the issue. Unless the root of the issue is they truly didn't know. Maybe there was a clinical gap in their knowledge. And that can be solved with education. However, if the dose that was dispensed was completely insane, why did the system not flag it? And how do you then reconcile flagging with alert fatigue? And so you have to have these conversations, and you have to be very mindful about where you're putting in hard stops and where you are choosing to not put in hard stops. Because if you make the hard stop too sensitive, you're going to lead to alert fatigue, and then all of your alerts that you put in are meaningless. Your barriers and your fail safes, your automations, your forced functions, these are things that are going to increase your compliance with those processes because they can't be bypassed. We also have a case study coming up on InfuVite product that I think is probably coming up soon, which I'll talk about a little bit right now, where when you rename a product in your system, where the differentiator is not the first word, number one, if you have two products named InfuVite and one is for pediatrics and it's called InfuVite Pediatric, and the differentiator is coming second, it's probably going to get dispensed wrong at least once or twice. If you change that name from InfuVite Pediatric to Pediatric InfuVite in your dispensing system, guess what? Now it starts completely different part of the alphabet. Visually, it doesn't look the same when you're checking. It's a lot easier to prevent those errors from occurring. So we're going to talk about implementing and monitoring. We talked about you need to assign someone who's responsible. It's usually going to be someone in leadership, but maybe you have a really engaged pharmacist or pharmacy technician who's really just, they love auditing, they love patient safety activities, they want to be involved. They want to ask you, why did it happen? How do we do better? Maybe they're really engaged and they're looking to get into leadership one day down the road, or maybe they just love the process. Engage your staff, get them involved with that person. Don't put it all on one person, because ultimately what's going to happen when one person makes the decision is that everyone's going to be unhappy with the result, including the person who made the decision, because they don't feel like they got enough buy-in, they didn't get the support. So alleviate that frustration for those team members by making it collaborative. Set your metrics for success. Don't say we need 100% compliance tomorrow. That's unrealistic. But if you can figure out a way to add in that forcing function, trend your results going forward from that. If you think that maybe we can reduce our rate by 30% in the next 3 months, that's great. Because if you didn't do something, your error rate would be the same. So work out how you can make incremental improvements over time. Don't try to be perfect tomorrow, because again, you're going to set your expectations too high. You're going to fail. You're going to get frustrated and you're going to quit. And then monitor. You can use dashboards if your company has things like BI. You can use audits by just literally going and pulling work orders and saying, how are they filled? If we said we want you to do X, Y, and Z on your process and it's not being done, now you know that part of your process is being skipped. Talk to your teams and find out, why is that being skipped? What is the incentive to not follow each step of the process? Corrective and preventative actions get conflated a lot. When you're thinking about what is a corrective action, think about, how do I fix it for John right now? If you got the wrong dose, call the doc. Get the right dose if it's clinically appropriate, or get that patient triaged to the appropriate level of care. That is your corrective action. You are fixing what happened right now. You're making the patient aware, you're making the prescriber aware, you're filing your incident report, and you are fixing the issue. Your preventative actions are what we've been talking about with, how are we putting a systems level fix in place when appropriate. Your preventative actions may also include things, and this is where it gets a little bit fuzzy, but your follow-up with your team members. If someone was reckless and they did something that they knew was a risk, and they did something that they knew they shouldn't have done, or that the risk was not an appropriate risk to take, you need to be following up with them as well. If you have, for as an example here, an incorrect beyond use date, you need to figure out, why did that go out? Why did the system not flag it? Does your system support flagging BUDs in your system, depending on the vehicle, depending on the drug, depending on the container that it's contained in? And then talk to your team members. Did you understand how to set the BUD here? Did you understand what the resources were? Did you understand all of these things? And if the answer is no, again, get them the education that they need as part of your corrective actions. But look at fixing the systems issues that allowed that BUD to go out incorrectly. So we already mentioned the InfuBite a little bit, but if you are seeing the same drug product going out wrong, don't think about InfuBite. Think about an antibiotic. Think about anything that looks similar. If you are having a consistent med error, it's not human error every time. It's a systems level issue. Figure out, how are we solving it so that it doesn't continue, because it could be fine 7 times out of 8. But on that 8th time, if that person has an allergic reaction, you've just caused significant harm. And part of what we are doing when we are looking at these quality systems is saying the organization has a responsibility to maintain the systems in a manner that support safe and effective patient care. And if you do not implement those changes and you are continuing to rely on your people, you are not operating in a quality manner. You need to put those systems changes into place to support those clinicians. So I know we had talked about switching the name from the end to the beginning. We also looked at physically segregating when possible. If it is next to each other on the shelf, it's going to be real easy to grab the wrong one. I mean, that is a human error. If you grab the wrong one off the shelf because they're next to each other and they have basically the same name, who's at fault? Is it the person who picked it? Or is it the person who decided that this is where they go because they're alphabetical and they go next to each other? Or is it the system that doesn't support barcoding and you aren't able to barcode scan at verification? So what is it? I also want to I'm going to take it back to regulations for a second here and be clear about 797. 797 requires that as the DP, you are investigating complaints about your CSPs as well. If there's an issue with a CSP, you need to understand what that was and whether those issues then may relate or may impact other CSPs you're dispensing. So having a thorough and strong RCA process and having a thorough and strong CAPA process is also a very important component for being in compliance with your regulations. And again, ARC and ISMP both recommend RCA and robust responses. CAPA is not the only one. RCA2 is one that's getting a lot of traction as well. So be familiar with what is available in terms of tools, but have something. Your RCA and your CAPA are both parts of your quality management process, and they need to be integrated into it. If you have a monthly or quarterly review of your operations quality metrics, talk about your errors. Don't say that Joe did it. Talk about what happened. Talk about the impact on your patients, and talk about what you as a leadership team at your location are doing to address them. You want to look at your near misses. Your near misses are such a critical component to what you're doing, because a near miss is a warning and it's an error that has time to fix. It didn't impact the patient. I want you guys to think about near misses not as, oh, same thing happened again. I don't know why they keep reporting it didn't get there. Your near misses are a gift because you did not cause harm at this point. Look at the commonalities. Don't spend less time on your near misses. Figure out what needs an RCA, and your things that have recurrent near misses should be at the top of your list. Those are the items that are continuing to happen. And in all of the serious events that I tend to see, there is usually at least one near miss that happened upstream. So look at your near misses critically. Continue to engage your teams in improvement. Make sure that they understand that their reporting is important. It's not just important because it's going into a database and it's going to be recorded and some guy like me is going to read it and that's the end of it. It's important because it leads to system changes. And if a team member of yours makes a suggestion or makes a report that then has an impact on your operation, it sounds simple. Tell them. Say, you reported X. Because you reported X, we dug into Y, and now we're changing this. And that change is happening because of your input. If it's consistent themes, pull your team in and say, we've been evaluating and trending this issue over the last 2 months. We wanted to make sure that we were consistent in understanding what was going on, but because of those reports, this happened. If you don't circle back with your team, they think these reports are going into the void and they're never being looked at again. And if you've got a robust QA program, they're being looked at. Don't let your efforts go to waste by not letting the people who are entering these reports know that they're being looked at and they're being acted on. So tying it all together, when you're triaging your RCAs, when you're triaging your event severity, you want to figure out how severe was it? What was the harm potential? If there's a high harm potential, it doesn't matter if it's a one-off event, you need to figure out why it happened. Because if it happened once, it can happen again. Don't forget to get, if you're a home infusion pharmacy like I am, get your nursing team involved, get your dietitians involved, get your pharmacists involved, your pharmacy technicians involved. The more eyes you have on something, the more opportunities you have to identify where there's a break in that process. And map the process the way it should be and the way it was done, because those gaps are going to be important. When you're looking at CAPA, you are looking at system level controls. And I didn't think that was going to be in my most said words of the day, but look at assigned accountability. Make sure that someone is the owner. And again, make sure that there are due dates for follow-up and due dates for reporting out how that follow-up is going to be shared. When you're monitoring for your effectiveness, audit. Everyone is busy, but you're going to be less busy if you're auditing than if you're responding to serious errors and DCP walks in the door and wants to know why you had the same error 7 times. Look at your KPIs, figure out how things are going, and request feedback from your staff on the effectiveness of the implementations. If they think that nothing has changed, but you've added a step that's not impacting it, go back to the drawing board, evaluate. Is it an adjusting period? Is it truly appropriate? Or is their feedback meaningful? And don't ask for feedback on day one. Everyone's going to hate it on day one. Ask them after a week. Ask them after a month. Then you're going to get more real feedback. And then trend and escalate. If you are seeing patterns, escalate them. Notify your leadership team and see what you can do. I'm sure none of this is going to be a surprise after everything I've already said in this presentation, but the common pitfalls that we see are when we're blaming people, when we're taking superficial actions like saying, we're going to educate, we're going to train, we're going to remind, not following up. If you don't trend, if you don't follow up, you don't know what your data looks like. And so you're going to be, you have this event, 6 months down the road, the same event happens again, and you're surprised all over again. Well, we did all these things 6 months ago, but you didn't trend it. You didn't know that it was consistently being implemented. And then conflating your corrective and your preventative actions. They are distinct, and one without the other is incomplete. So by taking those steps, by avoiding those pitfalls, you are building a culture of safety within your organization. By appropriately treating human error as truly human error, where they did not intend to make an error, they did not see that error as a consequence of their actions, you are coaching, you are training, you are empowering those clinicians, because there's not a person in this room who has not made an error. By having regular audits, you are, again, identifying issues before they become larger issues. When you're getting support from your leadership team, or you as the leader are supporting your teams, you are creating a safe place. If your quality program inspires fear in your teams, your quality program has failed. It needs to be a safe space. And you need to have transparent communication. If your teams feel empowered by what they're doing and they feel like what they're doing matters, they are going to engage with your quality program. So we're going to shift gears pretty dramatically, and we're going to talk about second victim syndrome for a second. If there is an error, and it doesn't have to be a serious error, but if there's an error, there is often a second person at that table, and there is trauma involved. If you have a pharmacist who's been involved with a serious error, a nurse, a technician, and they don't have to be at fault. If there was a serious event that occurred, those clinicians may become withdrawn. They may exhibit the signs of depression. They may try to avoid similar situations in the future. They may get to experience a lot of the symptoms of burnout, or they may just withdraw. And when they withdraw, you have not supported them adequately following an event. They are a person as well, and just because they may be responsible for harm does not mean that we then turn around and ignore them as a human being. And so the events that we are talking about, the most severe events, are also the ones that are most likely to result in second victim syndrome. And some of these risk factors include things like a patient passing away, a dispensing error with a completely wrong drug was dispensed and the patient had an adverse event, or any other kind of preventable harm to the patient, whether it's a care coordination failure or anything else to that effect. Not just from the human perspective, but from the business perspective. If your team members get disengaged and burned out from these feelings of second victim, they're not going to engage with your QA program. They don't engage with your QA program, they're not going to do event reporting. If they don't do event reporting, you don't know what errors are happening in your operation. If you don't know what errors are happening, you can't prevent them or fix them. And if you can't prevent them or fix them, you're going to have more errors, resulting in more team members experiencing trauma related to second victim syndrome, which is going to perpetuate a negative cycle in your operation. So the call to action with second victim syndrome is delay the disciplinary conversations, number one. Show up for your team. Don't just ask them the day after, how are you doing? Have a conversation. Pull them into your office and say, how are you doing really? Ask them regularly. It's not a one-time conversation. These are people. If you put yourself in their shoes, you could probably empathize a little bit more with, are you losing sleep? What resources do you need? How are you doing? Ask them. do you know about what's available to help support you during this time? Because it is traumatic. And the word trauma is thrown around here a lot because it is trauma. Offer them peer support. Make sure they know that they're not alone. If you have an employee assistance program with your organization, offer it to them. Having a just culture and having a good, robust QA program doesn't mean that there's no consequences. But remember the person that you're working with that has value. So the call is really just see those people as humans and recognize that you might have made a mistake, but you still deserve not to hate yourself over it. We already talked about this. So our 3 takeaways here are that your RCAs fail when you stop at human error without digging further. Your kappa strength determines the recurrence risk. If you don't have a good plan to confirm that your kappa is going to work, it's not going to. And supporting your staff is essential for developing that culture of safety. Here are some references. If anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer them. Go ahead.
Hold on, before you ask questions, let's get a mic to you so everyone can hear.
I have just a comment. Having dealt with root cause analysis for many years through different types of IEDs in long-term care and hospital. It is very important if your reporting starts at a staff level or a technician level, what the comments are made when they're sending the email or that form. It should never say an error, a mistake. It should be an occurrence, a concern, because all those paperwork are subpoenable by a court of law. So it is very important when you're training your staff in reporting these to use certain verbiage so that it doesn't end up with just, as you said, a mistake was made by a technician or a pharmacist and it ended there, because that can be subpoenaed.
I'm not a big fan of email for that reason. That's why I'm such a big advocate for getting really comfortable with your PSES programs. Trying to think. Tough because I'm not a lawyer, so I try not to get too into legalese. And yes, emails, especially when you're saying an error occurred, are very problematic because we don't always know even that an error actually occurred. The patient might think an error occurred, and it might be that we dispensed it appropriately and pursuant to the orders from the prescriber. So I am always an advocate for this happened. The patient received X, they were prescribed Y, or the visit was delayed. The patient would like a callback. We don't want to get, I always tell my teams, don't get into the root cause in an email. That is a patient safety activity, and it belongs within your patient safety evaluation system. If it's not contained in there, the language from ARC is something along the lines of conducting investigations outside of your PSES can result in it becoming discoverable, something to that effect. So it's a really good call out, and thank you for saying that, because it is so important that you educate your teams that your PSES is the notification method for you. And if the patient needs something more urgently than maybe the next morning, it's a phone call to your leader and making sure that they're aware of it happening. Because especially in our larger operations, you may get multiple event reports in a given day, and they may not get to that event report until noon the following day, when it may require escalation at 7 a.m. before you open, depending on what happens. So thank you for that call out.
Other questions for Joe?
Here's your CE code. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.